Okay, hi. My name is Kelly Taxter. I'm the Barnett and Annalee Newman Curator of Contemporary Art at the Jewish Museum. This is our first Instagram Live artist conversation, which I'm having today with Andrea Bowers from Los Angeles. She'll be joining us from a very special place in her backyard. Andrea was in the exhibition Take Me, I'm Yours, which happened in 2016. She had a great piece that maybe some of you who are watching will remember called Political Ribbons. It was a vast array of long satin ribbons that were silkscreened with slogans, kind of activist and protest slogans. And it was inspired by her own large collection of agitprop material. And it came out of the tradition of putting political slogans on ribbons, which now have maybe migrated to buttons and posters and things like this. But we'll talk more with Andrea. She's going to join us now about her practice and what she is up to currently.
I'm afraid to move, but
Yeah,
the neighbor's dog is going to bark at me.
Don't move. Don't move a muscle because you're here. It's so hard.
I'm trying to get closer to Wi-Fi. There's no
Uh,
Wi-Fi in Los Angeles, Kelly.
What do you mean?
No, I mean, it's crazy, right? I'm in Los Angeles. Every neighbor has Wi-Fi and it's not working.
That's because you guys are all trying to use it at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay,
up here in the country.
Yeah, I'm trying to get out of the sun a little because it's really bright. Sorry about
Yep.
that. I could see you, but I couldn't.
Okay.
You were frozen.
Oh, well, I was droning on about lots of things, and I was talking about your piece that was in Take Me, I'm Yours,
Right.
the political ribbons, and a little bit of background about that exhibition and kind of why we're here talking to each other today, which is partly because you were in that show, and that was such an incredible piece, and I love talking to you and working with you through that. And I guess just, we can kind of get into some stuff and talk about practice in general, but also what you're kind of up to now and the video that you just made and where you're thinking things might be going for you, and stuff like that. So I guess we should start maybe at the beginning. And I would think you'd kind of define your practice as art and activism or social practice. And
Yeah, I mean, I probably would I think social practice is so specific and ever defining. The artists who really do that, it makes me nervous to think about my practice in those ways. I think I use tools from the practice that I've learned from working with Suzanne Lacey for so many years and being friends with her and really teaching, but learning as a teacher in her program. But yeah, I think really I make work about activism and I try to create a kind of visual impact and record of documentation of what activists are doing.
yeah, and the program with Suzanne Lacey at Otis is it's a graduate program in public practice, which
Yeah, she's not there anymore, but it was for 12 years. She founded this amazing program. It's funny, she'll be happy. The first thing we're talking about is the public practice program, but it's called New Genre Public Art. But it was a master's degree in engagement,
yeah,
public engagement. So it's kind of based on, I would say collaboration. It comes out of 70s feminist, kind of like feminist art program strategies of pedagogy and making, and kind of like sociological case study research where you work with a community, and collaborate with a community. So, yeah.
Which is really kind of how you've gone about your own practice in so many ways. And
Right, except I think that, the reason I hesitate is because I make objects.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And a lot of times the work that's made is ephemeral or it's performative or it's pedagogical or, instead of I in my heart, I love to draw and make things.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you're an object maker, and
yeah,
I mean, you make really good looking objects too, in addition to these
thank you.
projects that are these all encompassing, all engrossing, you know, community projects. Actually, I found out that you gave drawing lessons to my best friend's mom, just as an aside.
I, 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 that was, she's a very special person too.
So
And
funny.
that was like such a joyous time in my life.
God, the
Yeah.
world is very small. But yeah. So just
That's Nancy.
yeah. I,
And Nancy's one of the most amazing human beings on the planet. So it
I
was I got all I got all the lessons.
well, I mean, I guess just let's go back to your actual work.
Hmm.
Because we were going to be talking from your tree, from your incredible oak tree in the backyard, which we
I
can,
can show it to you.
yeah,
I'm just underneath it
it's
now.
amazing. Even just on this teeny tiny little cube of a picture that I have here, it's an incredibly majestic structure there. Wow.
It's California oak.
It's really beautiful. Um, but that's intricately connected to your what you kind of have said is your first overtly political artwork, right? The piece is called Deja Gloria.
Yeah, Gloria.
Yeah.
But
And
that was a different piece. The I think the I Oh yeah, Vieja Gloria. Yeah, it was it was like my first overtly political piece. It was a piece about a tree sitter, John Quigley, in the Valencia area where CalArts is.
mhm,
Well, the little area of California that CalArts is located at. It was like a few miles from the school actually, but he was trying to save a 200-year-old oak tree from being cut down um, for urban sprawl. They were cutting this oak tree down to widen a road to for for an expanded housing development that had not yet been approved by the government, but they were still doing it anyway. So I actually was making work about crowds at the time and was reading about this tree sit in the paper and how much attention it was getting in the crowds. So I went out there to like document the people, and I ended up becoming best friends with the tree sitter, and he's still one of my best friends today, John Quigley. And he was in that tree, I think, for 4 months. I can't remember exactly. And what ended up happening was they ended up digging up the tree and moving it. It was bigger than a space shuttle, and it's moved 2 blocks, and it's still alive. So complicated, but saved the tree.
right. And that kind of, I guess, first more overtly political piece and it being tied to this idea around land use and rights and who has the rights and the power over that land is kind of a through line in your work. And I was reading an interview when you were talking about a different piece that had to do with lands that were being auctioned off in Utah, and you were just kind of making this connection between what those kinds of issues are related to, which is kind of history of manifest destiny and westward expansion, and kind of what's been depicted as the kind of successful history of the American West. And I thought it was a really nice way to think about this part of your practice in general, and just thought maybe you could elaborate a little bit on that idea.
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, I've been I was thinking about the artist's role in colonialization through documenting the lands of the powerful throughout history. Because landscape is one of our main genres as artists. So I was trying to think about landscapes for the people versus the powerful. And, recently I've been thinking a lot about a different way to say it that I've learned through both Luchita Hurtado and probably, I don't know, I think that recently, Tokata Iron Eyes, who's a young 16-year-old activist from Standing Rock who lives in Pine Ridge now, that, we have to think of the earth as a relative versus a resource. And so trying to speak from that perspective.
Yeah. And that, so the person you just mentioned, Takata, was the subject of your most recent gallery show at Andrew Krepp's. My Name Means Future. Was that the name of the show, or is that the name of the video?
It's close. The name of the show was a slogan, Think of Our Future.
Right.
And the video is My Name Means Future, because literally Tokata means future in her Lakota language.
Can you talk a little bit about the differences between the pieces that preceded that one, and kind of maybe even just your process or how you went about investigating getting together with Tim DeChristopher, who was the person in Utah, and then this, much younger person that you worked with just recently, like just the differences that kind of evolved for you in like what kind of issues and projects you were looking for then versus now?
I mean, I don't like, it's complicated because I think that early on I was thinking about educating myself. I was trying to fill in the blanks. It's almost like a Howard Zinn history of the United States, people's history of the United States. I was like trying to learn about activists and the history of activism because I didn't know anything about it. And in that process of educating myself, I was making work about it. So I was looking at I was making work about activists who were no longer alive, or activists who were my elders, and trying to interview them, like Pat McGinnis in the Army of Three, the abortion rights activist in San Francisco. And then I started, then there was like critique, and I think us artists do listen to critique. It affects me very deeply, and sometimes it's right and sometimes it's wrong. But I was receiving criticism about nostalgia. And for me, it was less about nostalgia because I was interested in these actions happening today, and the relationship, like that history is connected, and we need to learn from history to fix the problems now. We need to look back in history. But I also then I think I also, through this education, became more courageous and started doing some frontline activism and becoming more involved with activists instead of like just documenting. And these, I developed friendship networks of activists. So then I started making work about my peers. And recently I've been thinking a lot about the two words. I just made a neon in Germany that says grief and hope right before all of this.
That's like this right now.
Yeah, so it's become a really poignant collection of words for me because I was thinking a lot about eco grief, and that I, in a way, ignore it because it's so painful. This was before the pandemic.
Right.
So it was like this idea that like every time something goes extinct, or the Amazon burns, or a tree is cut, or I don't know, an ocean is polluted, like there's this sense of loss and grief, and that's like a term. It's like ecological grief.
I never heard.
And so, yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I've not heard that term yet, actually, but of course we all have it.
Yeah, and so I was thinking about like, I'm not the only one. There's a bunch of people kind of talking about, before even the pandemic, this simultaneous feeling of sadness, deep loss, and yet still needing to have hope. And so I was just like, I have a survey show at Abteiberg in Germany, with Susanne Titz, and the title of it is Grief and Hope, and I made a neon saying that. So for me, hope is in these young activists. Like if someone, I'm trying to pursue hope these days, even more than ever. And so for me, I find hope that there's a younger generation of activists who are pushing really hard.
Yeah.
And so somebody like Lucia Elaine, who I'm working with, it was with Movimiento Cosecha, who did the big neon sign that said, uh, we are 11 million, talking about like I just asked her organization to come up with a slogan and I just make it in neon. And it was on the High Line for
Mm-hmm.
quite a while. And now it's in upstate New York at OMI. And anyway, I've asked her to write about me, or not about me, but about her activism,
Mm-hmm.
kind of for a publication for me. So she's very young and she was a dreamer. And so I just, so that's where my hope lies. So I've been thinking a lot about youth activists, but I'm not giving up the activists my age or, either, because like right now I'm working with some activists who are in Ohio who are working on a nature bill of rights. Um, I guess I'm like thinking a lot about the environment right now. I mean, I've always thought that all of these issues overlap: feminism, um, environmentalism, climate
Yeah.
justice, and like um, the issues of immigration rights and labor rights. These things are all entwined, right?
Yeah. No.
Gender issues.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of, I think, one of the things I've been interested in now is this idea of intersectionality, or all of these different activist initiatives kind of being in their own lanes a little bit and meeting sometimes. Is that I think somehow through this totally collective experience, there's opportunities for all of us kind of to do the same thing together, or
Hmm.
to work more powerfully together, perhaps. Or if things were taken on in a passive way before, what can we do to actively get other things that we want moving forward? And that even just that little nugget of an idea seems so clearly more like it is like a hopeful, youthful thing. So
Yeah,
when I
but this nature bill of rights is an awesome idea.
so
So
this
it's almost like
people
giving.
in Ohio are putting this together,
Yeah, well, I'm from Ohio, so
right?
Toledoans. It's a group called Toledoans for Safe for Toledoans for Safe Water, because I'm from right up on Lake. Oops, are you there? I grew up with
Uh-oh.
I grew up. Can you see me?
Mm-hmm.
I can see you. I grew up around with Kathy Opie, and I grew up in the same town. I don't know if you know that.
Huh.
But we grew up like, right on Lake Erie. And she's done a lot of work with taking photos of the lake too. It's very special to us, but it has this horrible algae bloom
Mm-hmm.
that's coming from corporate animal farms, basically, because there's so much manure that's going into the lake that like it got into the water system in Toledo and people couldn't drink the water.
Right.
So the people of Toledo came together to basically give Lake Erie personhood. If corporations can have personhood, why can't a piece, why can't an aspect of nature? So there's a movement. I think Mark Ruffalo just came out with a documentary about it. I have not seen it. I missed it, but I need to see that. But this is not just this place. The movement for a nature bill of rights is, I think, in many small cities and towns throughout the world. This is being employed.
Right.
And the the Toledo residents voted it in. Actually, it passed on the ballot, but the governor, and I think the governor took Toledo to court to get it canceled. So this is a point where the people's laws are they're not enforcing them. So what does a community do to enforce their own laws when their government won't? So it's like an interesting situation right now.
Right. And those CAFOs, those corporate animal farms, are right now like being hindered, and like they're not even able to get the supply chain of meat out from them right now because all the people working there are getting sick in the conditions. So it's actually like revealing it, aside from the fact that they're heavily polluting and, first of all, heinously cruel to animals, but then heavily polluting to their environment. Now that there's like a human toll, it'll be interesting to figure out like if something changes in that structure, because if the meat's not getting out, then the people aren't getting their, it's like kind of revealing itself as
Yep.
all messed up anyway.
It's really complicated. And, like right now, so Tokata Iron Eyes, her dad,
Mm-hmm.
they're doing a protest right now at this moment. I don't know exactly where it stands, but they have the Pine Ridge
Mm-hmm.
Reservation has shut down. They haven't totally, they haven't shut down the road. The freeways have been closed off, and people, they're being checked before they pass. I think for a while they shut them down, but what's her name? Nome, the governor.
Mm-hmm.
So they had some of the biggest outbreaks in the nation with the meat packing plants, and they turned them into essential businesses.
Right.
So that's in South Dakota. So
Right.
the tribe, the Pine Ridge tribe, has turned the freeway into checkpoints in the reservation because it's sovereign land, because they're trying to protect their people from the outbreak.
So they're doing their own, like their own.
Yeah, and she's fighting them with it, and they're trying to reach a settlement. But this is a huge issue because like Tokata's mom runs the clinic, right? She's a doctor I believe she runs the clinic in Pine Ridge. So, I'm really scared because like they're doing the right thing, and Chase, her dad, Chase Ironeyes, is a spokesperson for this, but I'm just really scared because if he gets arrested, I don't want him to go to jail because, I don't want to go to prison even for like a night. I got arrested for tree sitting. I went to prison. I went to a jail for 2 days. That's not the place to be right now. But her mom's running the clinic. Like their lives and their people's lives depend upon not getting coronavirus. It's at Pine Ridge.
Right.
So it's a battle going. It's not a battle, but it's a standoff right now at this moment because of the virus and because how it's being handled in South Dakota. So
it also just makes you think of like the very dark history of native populations being infected with smallpox from shared blankets and things like this. And so now there's that level of
there's an essay by Chase that he just wrote that just talks about that.
Really? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And also, Standing Rock just won lawsuits in court, So anyway, it's very complicated. And those resource extraction camps, they call them man camps. This is so dark. We should talk about something better. But they've been, they're women, the women of the tribes around those camps have been disappearing. They're finding them dead. They're being murdered and raped.
Right.
So, like, the whole thing is problematic. Anyway, that's in my video, too.
Right.
So, and then the other thing I'm obsessing with is, like, there are tree sitters up in Northern California right now trying to save this. Since I first started documenting tree sitters, it's been one of my things over the years. I find it, like, really fascinating. And there's nothing, it's pretty a magical thing to do, actually, to, like, it's a last resort, but to do this is, and these are quite, it takes a commitment to live in a tree for a long time.
I mean,
but they're
the rig you have to build and like what you have to do to get up there and do that is so wild. I mean, and you've made sculptures of those rigs.
Yeah, I mean, I was trained. I talked John Quigley, the tree sitter from the Deja Gloria tree sit, to teach me. He taught me how to tree sit, and I turned it into a training video. I like to make artworks that are both as kind of like beautiful choreography, but also training videos.
Mm-hmm.
And I've made several of them that relate to activism. And like one time I put, I think, 8 or 10 classically trained ballet dancers through a nonviolent civil disobedience training course where they learn to be drug away. And the choreography of it is quite beautiful. I think it's really beautiful.
No, it's beautiful. But
So,
that,
and
that's so fundamental to what the work is about too, that whole idea of nonviolent civil disobedience. And it's a great video.
thanks. Yeah, well, so yeah, I kind of did several nonviolent civil disobedience training videos that are also, I think, also beautiful art videos.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so as a video artwork, he trained me how to tree sit, and then like 4 or 6 months later, he called me up. He's like, "We've got to go. They're going to cut down an urban wilderness area to like 250 oaks and sycamores. So we've got to go in, and you're the only. Well, there's got to be a group of us, and you've been trained. You knew how to do it. So I did it. It was really scary.
How many
Really,
people are there with you at any given time? Is it like 3 or is it 20?
there were only uh it was, let's see, it was in Arcadia. So I don't know if it was government land. I think it was the county's land, I want to say. So it was a forest I've never been in a forest that was so untouched.
Yeah.
And there were 4 of us, 2 women and 2 men.
Each in.
And we decided to go 2 and 2 in 2 trees at opposite ends of the forest. I mean, the problem was we couldn't get people in to see us. We didn't have crowds who could protect us and support us.
Right.
The police kept them out. But it was tragic because I never expected this to happen. I thought, oh, I'm either going to be up here forever or I'm going to be up here for like, a couple hours and they're going to take us down.
And
I think about this and I remember I'm like sitting in this tree with like 10 sheriffs underneath me and my phone rings and it's Edgar Arsenault. So, Andrea, are you in a tree? I heard it on the local news.
Life goes on.
Yeah. Well, no, he heard it on the news. So he called me and I answered because it was Edgar, But
So
they cut the forest down around us and they put all of the wood in wood chippers. It was violent. It was so violent. And when I was arrested, there were 2 trees left in that empty, huge field. It was the saddest thing. When I was sitting in that tree, like birds and mice and bugs and everything you can imagine just climbed into the tree with us and flew through that tree. It was like the death of an ecosystem. Like it was the most shocking experience I think I've ever had. That was just instantaneous.
What was that's actually really incredible I mean, it's clear that for those protests, you do need that. Like the original one with John was successful because so many people rallied around you. You had that kind of community there, whereas in the big giant forest, you couldn't get people in, and therefore there was no shame. It's like there needs to be this shaming that goes on, this like.
Well, you need people, you need people to support you and you need the
Yeah.
media to be able to get in. I mean, they had helicopters flying over us and I was like trying to tape things together and John was trying to like put like canvases at the top of the canopy, like, like so they could see where we even were because we were in a forest,
What were they cutting the trees down for if it was a national park?
It wasn't a national park. It was like state land.
Okay.
So we have all these concrete rivers out here, and we have a lot of, what do I want to say, dammed water. And they need to, the sand and the soot no longer flows naturally to the ocean. So they need to collect it all and put it someplace. And that was barrel shaped where the forest was. So they cut down all the trees so they could put some soot there. It's terrible. Right. Like bad city planning on top of like one mistake on top of the other. And then, they'll build a housing development on all this dirt that's probably toxic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just tragic.
And the one going on now is also, it's in Northern California, right?
Yeah, so those are the classic ones, the ones that all
Mhm.
of Earth First were working on. I don't know a lot about it. I just know that um, I've been told for years about this magical place up in the old growth redwoods called Strawberry Rock, and
Mhm.
that it's one of the most beautiful places, and it's like a last stand. And I know that everyone thinks that there's a lot of sustainable forestation going on up there, but I'm not buying it. And I just heard right as the coronavirus started occurring and we went down to this like, stay at home thing, that there were tree sitters up in Northern California at Strawberry Rock. And my uncle lives up there, so he's been up there forever. He has like he's like a sheep farm. He's like in his 80s.
Mhm.
Um, and so I'm going to try to go up soon and maybe camp on the land and see if I can find them.
I mean, it seems like kind of maybe an urgent thing to do. It occurs to me that during this period, a lot of things can happen under the radar. Not, I mean, on the like on the bad side, that just like they're, you know, ending abortion in Texas because of the pandemic, for example. Like there's all these kind of things happening in parallel with this shutdown in various ways that I feel like if they could just people could just walk in there and clear Forest Grove if they want because nobody's looking and what else.
Well, that's what's happening in the Amazon right now.
Yeah.
And actually, that's what I got arrested with John Quigley and Julia J. Posen, and they're now working on Artists for Amazonia. That's their big project because the Amazon is like the heart of the earth in terms, it's like the heart of the earth.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's scary right now, right? Like, none of us know what the future is. My neighbor's yelling. Can you hear him?
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry.
Hi neighbors, we met them.
But it's just so scary. I mean, it's scary. Like, you can't. It's hard to protest. I mean, we have protesters, but they're like, it's the ones who are doing it are a lot of them are protesting against
Mm-hmm.
the safety policies that we have.
Right.
I and a lot of things are being done because it's so hard to live right now, right? It's like hard to figure out. Everybody's trying to eat and get
Yeah.
food and pay housing and how do you deal with money? I mean, it's just overwhelming.
The very, very basics are at stake. So how do you uh, and protest takes bodies and takes critical mass. So how do you reform and how do you rethink how that happens given the situation and people's risk factors and
Just like art, right?
yeah,
Like
right.
art is so physical in a way. So yeah, how are we going to do all of this?
And it
It's,
remains to be seen. I mean, I really don't know. I think I try not to think about that too much. It's too
I,
complex. But you just made some art since this has happened with Suzanne. You guys made that video. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? It was such a beautiful, hopeful thing. Speaking of hope.
it's a 1978 text from a book by Susan Griffin. So I came so one of my fears in a kind of way, and we can get into this because early, like in our past, you have asked me about humor.
Yes, I have. But you
So
can't
I,
don't have any, and I think you're like very funny.
well, I haven't been funny today. I've been kind of dark. Anyway, Suzanne Lacey and I think, are such dear friends because we laugh a lot together. And I'm really grateful for her humor. And when I was a young artist, I thought that the feminists from her generation were very serious and not funny at all. Like that Martha Rossler in the kitchen, I didn't know that that was funny too. Like I was afraid to laugh. I just thought that Semiotics of the Kitchen was so smart that I didn't understand
You
it.
didn't get the the slyness. I mean, Martha has a very sly sense of humor.
Yes, yes. I mean, you know, she's amazing. So, um, one of my fears has been, you know, a kind of, I sort of in the late 80s and 90s, late 80s and early 90s, received my graduate education. And I sort of felt, I think there was like a real feminist backlash.
Mm.
And I sort of felt like, uh, they said something, I don't have my glasses on, I can't read it. I sort of felt like that I wasn't allowed, I had to beware of my feminism and that I had to have a certain kind of intellectual approach to my work because it would had to be very theory driven or very analytical.
Mm.
And so I have been really afraid of a kind of like ecofeminism spirituality because, you know, I was young, I didn't have a career, and I was afraid that I would never have a career if I addressed some of those issues. So I think
Like
sort of like,
there's so much kind of there's so much misogyny embedded in that I mean I remember that too from being younger, that so much of that was poo-pooed or what just basically wasn't taken seriously just wasn't taken seriously, you know, from a certain type of intelligentsia, let's say.
mm-hmm. Or
Right,
pedagogy, right?
certainly at school, yeah, 100%.
Mm-hmm. And then I can't really pinpoint that anyone said it to me, but I just felt it from the system.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I think that I've been trying to overcome those types of kind of like patriarchal capitalist belief beliefs that I internalize somehow, whether they're real or not, but I need to get them out from inside of me. So I decided to start studying the ecofeminist writings and poetry for guidance because I was looking for hope again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, about 8 months ago, and I started to read about posthumanism, but I was like, I don't think I can read about posthumanism until I start thinking about ecofeminism, and I just like it was so exciting. So I just went in that direction and it's so meaningful to me. So now I've been tiptoeing my way out to reach out to some of these women because I admire them so much. I'm almost like afraid to like connect with them, but I've been trying.
Yeah.
And so, like, I just had a 2 hour Skype conversation with Dina Metzger, and she's like my idol. But so when I told Suzanne about this, you know, she remembers all of this, and she's like, well, Dina Metzger was, you know, one of my mentors, but she said Susan Griffin, the first book she suggested I read was that Susan Griffin book that we used.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Judy Chicago decided to do that create art for the earth, Suzanne called me and she goes, let's do something together. And I think I had called her up on day one of Stay at Home. And I was like, let's do a project right now. And she's like, are you crazy? What are we going to do? And then like a couple weeks later, she's like, let's do this. And so, you know, we had to make it pretty fast. And so we just we quickly came up with an idea. And then she sent me some text. She went through a couple of books, and we ended up taking like 48 hours to land on part of that text in that book. And then Suzanne's so organized and so good at, you know, engagement with people that she created this very organized way of like reaching out to all these people and like artists that we admire, feminists that we admire, activists that we admire, and ask them all to read. And then the amazing editor, Lindsay Moffert, video editor, edited it for us. And I think it, you know, that text was really just emotionally meaningful to me. You know, it was very much about the earth as a relative, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was really nice to see all of those women reading it from all those generations. And Suzanne and I are always doing intersectional artworks.
Yeah. No, I loved why. I mean, I didn't know everybody.
Now,
I had to go
so,
back, follow, and read. I mean, I knew all of the artists, really.
right, but like Jody Evans and
Yeah,
activists like that, yeah. But I didn't mean intersectional. I meant intergenerational.
Yeah,
Intergenerational. Suzanne and I have been trying to do intergenerational feminist projects for years.
that intersect. Your work
That
intersects.
that intersect the generations. I got the I words mixed up.
Well, the intergenerational thing is really, it's really manifesting in your work now between your things with her and then this younger generation of activists. And
Well, I think that when I was young, we thought I mean, okay, a lot of us in my generation, when we were young, would talk about that maybe we thought their generation was really mean because we idolized them and they didn't appreciate it. But, that was total projection too.
yeah,
Like they
yeah.
didn't know, like.
Well, because you were too talk to them, so they probably thought you were standoffish.
Right. I mean,
Yeah, but it is. There is a kind of reverence, or even I was telling you my story about when I was at art school and I was studying film, and Barbara Hammer was teaching a class, a seminar, one of our the big class basically. And I went in on the day of registration because obviously I was taking it and I knew who she was and I wanted to learn optical printing, which was her big thing amongst the subjects that she was working with. But I walked in and she had such an incredible look, with the spiky hair and the little Corbusier glasses and like a ribbed tank top and her like combat boots and her cargo pants and like all this metal hanging off of her.
Sounds amazing.
It's so intense. Like I walked in, a little mousy, like 19-year-old, I didn't know what end was up. And she was like, hi, we need women in this class. You're a woman. You are taking this class. Are you a feminist? I'm a feminist. We're going to make films together. And like went on to like immediately ask me what my biggest fear was. I mean, it was like, and just, if there was so much energy and intensity that came from her. And I just, I was so young and just trying to figure out, what my relationship to that was. And I think that, had I had that experience 10 years later, I would have been like, hell yeah, I'm a feminist. Yeah, I'm going to make feminist films too. I would have had like a much quicker, much more engaged response. But I think that generational divide is
But that was maybe her teaching you, right? Like,
absolutely. It's one of the things I remember more than anything. And it was, absolutely critical to work with her.
it's like a lifetime of growth, right? And we make a lot of mistakes along the way, but I think that I've been really grateful for a lot of curators because sometimes there's people I'm still afraid to reach out to people,
Yeah.
and curators have been really helpful helping me do that. Women curators connecting me, to and it's like so important, I think, to build community.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I have a lifetime of figuring out what it means to be a feminist, I think.
Yeah, hopefully, because it never at any one time and it never is static. So I think,
Yeah, that's why I call that one show Cultivating the Courage to Sin, which is a feminist text, but like, being the straight A student, like always working really hard and being the good girl, like how much of that is like patriarchal, like where's
yeah,
my,
no, totally. Because, I mean, historically, the boys are allowed to be bad. They were like cute when they were bad or something.
Right, but do we want to imitate the bad boyness either? Like that's a strategy too. But just yeah. So, but both of those roles can like limit your ability to find autonomy. Right? Like for me, I'm just trying to figure out what autonomy means. I think that comes from Hans Haka.
Yeah, maybe. Or also, I mean, in your situation too, it's interesting, and because you have like your studio practice and you do make like drawing and the neons and sculpture, and there are this object making aspect, but then almost in opposition to that, there's this community building aspect of the work. So you've got this push pull all the time, I would think. And clearly that's interesting and that tension is good, but you know, maybe it's not necessarily autonomy or something. I don't know.
It's schizophrenic.
Yeah. In a good way.
Who knows?
It's just, yeah.
I mean, I'm so grateful for my galleries and the career, but it's complicated, right? There's a lot of political compromises in a way that I struggle with. And just for that moment, there was a moment when I made that piece with Suzanne and I was doing some other projects where I was fundraising,
Mhm.
like just making tiny pieces to fundraise, where I was like the happiest I've been producing, because the pressure of the market and the pressure of the compromise of the market, you know, um, I mean, probably I function best. Am I allowed to say this? In a socialist kind of structure, where I wish I didn't have to make money. Like, I think, you know what I mean? Like,
I
I
think
wish
a
I,
lot of,
I didn't have to sell things. I don't know how to do it.
mhm.
We live in this really capitalist system, and it's funny to see the struggle with people needing to work but not being able to. Like, this is a really important time to rethink the structure of our government. I don't know if it's going to happen, but
Absolutely.
just emotionally how that felt, because now, I'm super scared. I'm
Hmm.
super scared about money,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
people that you work with that are in your studio and your, yeah, I mean, it's a whole ecosystem what we do. And it's, there's a lot of,
All the young artists,
yeah,
yeah, they have kids,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
And, is it Fiji? They've reverted to bartering. They're
Oh, I
reinstating.
didn't know this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Money isn't flowing through the way it needs to, so they're bartering.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't have an answer for all of this. I think about it a lot, and I have feelings, like I'm trying to trust my instincts and my feelings. But yeah, I mean, who knows
So did
but yeah, in a perfect world, maybe we
so
wouldn't.
then was that really fun to give those ribbons away and take me on yours?
Yeah, I mean, I love that.
I mean,
I
I
mean, it's like I do almost, I mean, Ian, who is an amazing artist who manages my studio, Ian Trout, he and I pretty much silk screened all of those ribbons. There were some other people I think I had to hire because that was like
we had
some, I hired some folks, yeah, because
yeah.
it was monumental amount. But I think, I silk screened thousands of ribbons that
Mhm.
year.
Yeah, no,
Or
you so many, and people just it was such an interesting project because everyone in the office has one hanging in their office now, like throughout the
pe
museum. They're everywhere.
people
Yeah.
still post them on Instagram. I collect photos from Instagram where people post themselves, or they have them hung in their house. Or if I could, I mean, I just love making these pieces that are gift culture. Like, they want, they can have them. They don't have to take them.
Hmm.
But that makes me really happy, you know?
Like you're also expanding that collection of agitprop, and it's yours.
Yeah.
You're,
Yeah. And
you're
people can still use them. I mean, every time I go to a march or a protest, I grab a group of them and hang them around my neck and my camera, and I'm off, and I
yeah,
give them away.
yeah.
It's really lovely. And I've used them both. I've silkscreen sets just for certain actions or tabling, and then other times for galleries. And I like that overlap, between the gallery. But one isn't more functional than the other,
Right.
because they move out into the world and function. And I love when, there's not, the efficacy is in the same place. I mean, I think the one thing that I have to keep reminding myself is that I was not really politically active until I became an artist.
Hmm.
So it was my arts education that really made me become like a critical creative thinker, right? Like, I became an activist, or I became politically active because of art.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't politically active, but I'm an artist. You know, what came first was the art. So I love that there's that overlap. You know, I think a lot of people think art can't be political, you know, and
Well, you
or
that it absolutely can. And I just got a warning from Instagram. This 1 minute and 44 seconds.
2 minutes.
That's kind of an amazing little spot to land.
Hmm.
And maybe we can leave it at that. And if I'll just plug the video. If you, I mean, I watched it on Vielmetter's website. Actually, I'm sure you can get it multiple places.
It's
Um,
on Judy's website or Instagram. I think that Hanswork Obrist has it on his Instagram, and I think Jessica Silverman might have it on her
so,
website or Instagram. Yeah,
so check that out. It's
and it's on mine.
right.
Oh,
And Andrea,
through
follow
the
that other
crack.
Instagram.
You fell through the crack at the table. I was like, wow.
Oh my gosh. Well, with that, I just want to say thank you so much for doing this. It was so fun.
I'm sorry the internet wasn't working, but
The internet's never working. It's always working and never working.
I was around the house trying to find bars.
Well, you found the bars.
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you. It was great to see you in this little square.
Yeah.
And I guess we should sign off and say goodbye. We've got 20 seconds.
Okay. Love you, Kelly. Be safe.
You too.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.